As we wrap up the holiday season and businesses with an online presence start thinking about strategies and ideas to drive business next year, search engine optimization is going to be one of those areas important for every website. On this video, we'll be talking about one of the most powerful tools in this space, Screaming Frog. So to tackle Screaming Frog, the basics, and a little more, we're joined by our very own Paulina Kogan. Thank you for your time, Kogan-san.
Thank you.
So Paulina is one of the most talented people that I know in this space. She's an expert in SEO. She's been in the industry for years, knows too many languages to list here. She's a published, booked author, speaker, and we couldn't be luckier to have anybody else to explain to us this. Again, thank you for your time. So let's talk about, before getting into the weeds of Screaming Frog and the powers at B, let's talk about SEO and defined SEO very quickly for those that are watching this video and have heard SEO, but there are so many strategies around there. What is SEO and what's the difference between SEO and other strategies from your point of view?
Thanks for your question. So SEO is basically search engine optimization, and it covers the whole range of different topics, as Jose mentioned, but in its essence, it's just getting as much traffic as you can from organic search. So not paid search, the free search. And SEO can range from creating content to optimizing the structure of your website to doing things like backlinking. So there's all sorts of different things. And the ways that SEO is different from, for example, advertising, paid search, is that, well, first of all, SEO just doesn't happen overnight. You need to put a lot of effort, you need to do working with your engineers, and it's going to take you a longer time to get into search, and also your positions are not guaranteed. But SEO is a really stable strategy in the long run, so once you've succeeded, you're going to stay on top of there for a while. Of course, you need to tweak things, but it's a much more sustainable strategy in the long run in regards to you're not having to keep pouring money into the strategy. It can coincide with advertising very well because you can't tackle everything with SEO. You need advertising for something, but it's a very valid strategy that works for most websites.
Let me take on before getting into the tool, you said be on top. I remember when I was dabbling in SEO years ago, if you search for a particular term, it was very consistent across whoever was searching it, that if you were on top or not. And now with all these personalizations and how everything has evolved within the years, you can't really say for sure that if you're going to search to whatever keyword, you're going to be on top, and that's, oh, I'm not on top, but this is not working, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So first of all, you can't say that I just want to rank for number one for example, electric vehicles, and that's all I want to do for my SEO. That is not a very good strategy. A good strategy is to try to maximize your traffic from all sorts of different words. Sometimes you're going to be on top, sometimes you're not going to be on top, and as Jose said, you're going to be on top for some users, but not others. So it depends, for example, on location. It influences the search results a lot. So whether a user is searching from the US or Japan, or even a city in Japan, or like a different part of the city in Tokyo, for example. So there might be a different result. And some results are different because of personalization, because Google kind of knows what sort of information the user might be searching for because of their search history. So even if you're performing very well, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be in the same position for every single person, every single search.
And on the other side of the same coin, I guess if you have a company and you're the owner and you're always searching your own name and you see yourself on the top, that doesn't mean that you have a very good SEO strategy in place. I presume.
Yeah,
so.
that's a good point. So you might want to use incognito mode to search your website to find out whether this is just personalized to you because you're always clicking on your website, or whether actually your website does show up on top for other users.
Yeah. Even I fall trap to that same thing, searching for my own name, and then somebody else searches for my name, and they don't see it. I'm like, what? I'm not as popular as I thought.
Yeah, the results might vary.
All right, so let's talk about the tool, Screaming Frog. What is Screaming Frog? I hopefully will be able to show it to people and do a little bit of a demo, but what is it at a high level?
Screaming Frog is a crawler tool for SEO that is super popular. So many SEOs use it every day. It's a wonderful tool. What it does is basically it crawls your website. So it goes through all of your URLs within your website and it collects information about it and it puts it in a nice little table. So for each URL, you're going to have your title tags, so titles of the pages, descriptions of the pages, things like canonical tags or redirects. So a lot of technical information.
So crawling means basically there's a browser, Internet Explorer, or not, or other, and it's just going through every page on the site, right?
So yes, Screaming Frog, I think they're using Chromium. Actually, they're based on Google Chrome. And they are going through your website, going through each page, finding links and getting and cataloging information about those links.
So they're pretending that they're Chrome and they're like a user that is going through everything on the page.
And you can actually configure it to pretend to be Googlebot, for example. So to pretend to be a particular sort of robot to check that you're not, for example, blocking Googlebot by using the Screaming Frog tool.
This is not a sponsored video by Screaming Frog, by the way. This is just a tool that has been in the space for a year. I don't know when was Screaming Frog's first launch.
It's been around for quite a long time, and it's being updated consistently. So there's more and more tools all the time. So I just love this tool and I use it a lot. So I love to kind of talk about it.
And I think at first it was only an open source free tool, and then they rolled out the paid version, if I can remember correctly. But anyway, it's not a sponsored video. We just, like many other organizations that do SEO, love the tool. It's a very powerful tool. All right. So you mentioned a few technical concepts there, and some people might be scared of like, I might not use this tool. And that might be the case. Like maybe this tool is not for you. Of course, if a team has an SEO, the SEO person is going to be using the tool. But many teams do not have an SEO. They have a marketing manager, they have a paid search strategist, a web designer, a web developer. Who do you think should be getting this tool and starting punching buttons on it?
So I think you need to think about what you want from this tool first of all. So there are some things that marketers can get out of the tool. So something that I mentioned is titles and descriptions. So titles and descriptions are things that influence how your website shows up in search. And so it influences things like click-through rate. So that's very important. And this is something that the marketer would need to think about. So think about a better kind of catch copy for the title or description of yours. So in that aspect, marketers can use this tool to list up titles and descriptions and see where there's maybe descriptions missing, or they're too long, or they are not very appealing to users. But a lot of the things that you can see in Screaming Frog are very technical, as I mentioned. So things like redirects, status codes, canonical tags, no index tags. So when I say those things, many marketers are not going to know what I'm talking about. And to be honest, not many engineers will also know exactly all of these terms, but engineers usually have a better knowledge about the technical aspects that might influence SEO. So in the way how engineers could use this tool is to find pages that are basically dead, so 404 links. So you shouldn't have 404 pages linked from your website, not only from the SEO perspective, but from the user experience perspective. So this is a tool that helps you find those broken links. And also things like redirects, where you have a whole bunch of redirects that might influence the performance or the speed of your websites. Those things can also be checked very simply with Screaming Frog. So in that way, an engineer might want to use this tool as well. One thing to keep in mind is that this is a robot. It crawls your website. Because it can crawl your pages very quickly. If you don't have a very strong server, and if you have a lot of pages and you have the paid version, for example, that can crawl an unlimited number of pages basically, it can cause a lot of strain on your server. So it's a good thing, even if you're a marketer who wants to use this tool, to consult with your system folks just to check that you're not overstraining your server and it's fine to crawl, and make sure that they don't confuse you for an attacking bot and don't block you from crawling as well.
So I was going to ask you if we could use it in the Google Merchandise Store. You know how Google Merchandise Store has the demo account for Google Analytics, and you can see all of data for the store. And anybody can see this, by the way, if you have Google Analytics access. Now I'm a little bit scared that you put that confused by attacking bots. So could we? We're about to go into a demo, and I was going to propose this. Can we perhaps do a scroll in the Google Merchandise Store? I'm sure Google has powerful servers.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So Google probably has very powerful servers. I don't think we're going to break the website if we crawl a couple of dozen pages, but it's generally not a good practice to crawl a website without permission. It's just kind of not good internet etiquette, I would say. I've heard horror stories about some companies crawling their clients' websites without permission and then being banned. I've definitely caused some damage in the past when the servers of some website that I crawled were not as strong as I suspected them to be, although I did have permission and I did consult about the speed. So I would not crawl someone else's website without permission, and I would suggest we crawl our own website. Although it's in Japanese, so maybe it's going to be a bit confusing, but let's try that.
Well, let's try it. Let's try it, and at least we'll get a flavor of those who haven't seen the tool in action.
Sure.
That's a very good point. I also have stories of, I was trying the SEO Frog like 5 or 6 years ago, and I broke a very important site. And when I say I broke, the site went down, and I got upset for the site being down, and I went to the IT team, and the IT team thought they were under attack, and it was just me doing an incredible amount of crawling with this tool. So with great power, great responsibility, I assume. Not I assume. That's, I think, very wise words.
Yes, wise words.
All right, so let's see the tool in action. Like you're saying, there is a lot of information and a lot of data the tool provides, but let's go over some of the basic things that you typically go with. Say, for example, if you are in charge of a particular site, you want to go and check it out. What do? So I see here that you just launched the tool.
Yes.
Why don't you run us through what you're doing there?
Okay. So let's scroll our website. So what we're going to do is we're just inputting our website into the search bar, and then we're clicking start, and it's starting to crawl our website. And the Ayudante website is not very big, so I'm not setting a speed limit, which you would want to do for a much bigger website to not overload your servers. So
wait a second.
Yeah.
If I'm just some person, I haven't used this tool, I load this tool, put my website, and then click enter. That sounds dangerously close to what I did and broke.
Yes, exactly. So that's what you're doing. You're just starting the crawl, and now I've stopped it pretty quickly, but we already have a whole bunch of different. So we have 340 rows here, and this is all the resources that the frog has crawled. So I'm going to switch to just HTML. So it's crawled over 140 pages in this very short amount of time. So the good thing is, if you're using the free account for your Screaming Frog, you can only crawl 500 pages. Sorry. So 500 crawling 500 pages is generally not really going to break your website. You should be fine. But if you're
This was like 2 seconds. And
it was very quick. So
Yeah.
it's generally it's super quick. So what it says right now at the bottom of the screen is that it crawled 22 URLs per second. So very,
Nice.
very fast. So what you can do in the version of Screaming Frog that is paid, you can set your speed limits, especially so when you have no limits on how many URLs you can crawl.
So can you set the speed limit on the free version?
You actually cannot. So you have to have the paid license to set the speed limit. So we've crawled our website without the speed limit right now, and we've got a whole bunch of results. And what you can see here is basically, even without downloading any reports, which you can download many, you see per URL, I've got my status code, so 200 means the page is alive. If it was 404, it would mean that we have a link to a dead page. And then we have things like whether the page is indexable or not, so whether Google can put it in its index or whether it's impossible. And then things like here we have our title, we have our meta description, so things that influence how your website shows up in search, as well as H1, so heading tags.
Okay, so there's a lot of stuff there.
Yes, a
Say
lot of stuff.
I'm a marketing manager, not or a technical person, and we are going to have the meeting to discuss new ideas for the new year and areas where we can improve, areas where we can perhaps brainstorm new keywords or some things to do for the new years to better our business. What do you think are some of the first reports or first areas we should take a look? And I should bring to the meeting like, hey, we should take a look at our status codes or.
Yeah, sure. So actually, Screaming Frog is a great tool for auditing. So to find that first step, like what should we do next? So I would just download this report that we're seeing right now. So I would do export, and I would have all of this information in an Excel first of all, and I would see what are the problems that we're seeing. So for example, you might see that lots of pages are missing descriptions, or you might see that titles are the same for a bunch of pages, which is not good SEO practice. Or you could see that they're absolutely fine, but you have problems with lots of dead links to 404 pages or lots of redirection within your website. So this, first of all, is a good general report to export and just see whether you find any issues that you would want to work on further.
Right. So for the trained eye, you're probably knowing where to look. But for those of us that are not in this space on a daily basis, maybe titles probably very important.
Yep.
How about descriptions?
Yeah. So titles and descriptions are not displayed in Google exactly as they're set through the HTML, but they're good suggestions to Google and they're used a lot. So titles and descriptions, I would say, are pretty important. Titles most of all, descriptions, I would say, second priority. And I just love the broken links and redirects just because they're so easy to understand, you don't want
Right.
broken links. So if you look at the Screaming Frog UI, you can see that there's things like bulk export or reports here, where you can, for example, bulk export redirects or response codes, so you can export all links to 404 broken links. So those kind of things you can also export if you find that there is an issue and you want to look at it closer.
Years ago, when I used this tool, I think the broken links is one of the areas where everybody thinks they're golden.
Yeah.
And then they do the report. What? What? And that's one of the surprising reports that it happened a lot of years. I don't know if technology has caught up to automate.
It still is the case for many websites that you just miss some broken links. It's normal. So another aspect of the reporting that I want to talk about is that Screaming Frog doesn't just crawl your pages, it also crawls your images. And when it crawls your images, it lists up your alt text. So what is alt text? It's alternative text that you can set up in your HTML that tells search engines what the image contains, but it also tells screen readers for users with visual impairments. So it's very important for accessibility. So you can use Screaming Frog to list up your images without alt text or with some weird alt text maybe to improve the accessibility of your website.
Right, that alt text. I'm not sure how it is in these days, but is that really heavy in the evaluation of? Because that can be an enormous task.
Yes, indeed. It is an enormous task, but Google unfortunately still cannot read text within images very well,
Right.
so they might not know what an image is. It's a very important signal to just help Google realize what an image is or a banner. And also, image search is just becoming such a big thing, especially, for example, in things like fashion, where people just search for outfit
Yeah, that's
ideas.
true.
So that's where, especially, you would know if image search is important in your particular area.
Right, that's a good point. All right, let's jump to Google Analytics because I know you're an expert in Google Analytics as well. And me being in the Google Analytics team, I always try to tie things up, tie things to Google Analytics, which is often the center of decision making for teams. So some of the information that a tool like this can pull cannot be found in Google Analytics. Some can, I assume. How do you tie things back to Google Analytics? How do you mix Google Analytics as the decision making center of many of the teams? How do you tie things, I guess?
Yeah, so actually for the paid version of Screaming Frog, you are able to connect your Google Analytics to Screaming Frog, so you can get all the data from Screaming Frog and some data from Google Analytics, such as uh, visits to a landing page or just page views, your bounce rate, your conversion rate, and how
From Screaming Frog to Google Analytics, or
from Google
from
Analytics to
to
Screaming
Screaming
Frog
Frog?
would be
Oh,
more
okay.
of what we can do. So that's for the paid version. For the free version, because this is all URL based, you can basically just download, export data from Screaming Frog, export data from Google Analytics, and tie it in, for example, Excel. A bit of work there, but you can find interesting things. So, for example, you can find that some pages that you find within Screaming Frog, they don't have many sessions in Google Analytics. So that would be an interesting starting point to see why don't I have any sessions to those pages, although maybe they're important pages. So that would be a good way of just looking at your pages and your data differently.
Or you were saying that you like the broken links. One of your most important pages have a lot of broken links, or even one.
Yeah.
Should be that's a good way of tying things. So URLs and titles is basically the area of commonality between like how you tie these things up.
Mostly, yes. I would go for URLs because,
You can have
yeah,
a
titles,
page.
it's a bit complicated. They might not always show up in Google Analytics in the same way that they are actually in the HTML, especially if your website is super complicated. So I
Yeah.
just stick to URLs there.
Right. I'm thinking if a person sees the report in Screaming Frog, they see. I'm thinking, what's the best telltale that something's wrong in the report of Screaming Frog? Things missing or things the same, or maybe I think maybe those two things.
Yes, unfortunately, there you would need a bit of knowledge about, for example, what is important for SEO and what each column means. So for titles, things missing are a bad thing, and then things that are completely exactly the same for different pages are a bad thing. For things like status code, 200 is great, 404 is not good. So for some things, 301 redirect might be expected, and for others, it might not be expected. So actually, Screaming Frog is a great tool in a way that it also has a very good help database. So the
A community
there's the community as well, so everyone loves
Oh.
Screaming Frog, so they write about how to use it. But then also the founder of Screaming Frog, who created the tool, also has written great articles about how to use each reports with a lot of detail and screen captions as well. So it's super interesting and easy to just look at those help pages and try things out yourself.
Awesome. So we're running a little bit above time. Let's wrap up with some key takeaways. The first takeaway, I'm sorry for that confusion there, correct me if I'm wrong, is explore but be careful with Screaming Frog because there's a real possibility that you can break your site and overload it.
Yes, indeed. It does sound scary. The breaking your website doesn't happen a lot, but it's just a possibility. So proceed with caution, proceed with help from your engineers or your system folks, but do proceed. It's an awesome tool. You can use it for free for at least 500 URLs on your website. So just try it.
Just try it. Second, what I got from you is export your reports and see if anything catches your eye. Of course, every situation is different, but most likely every situation will have something that will be quickly identified if you kind of browse through the reports.
Absolutely. So just export the general default report that just comes out when you crawl first, and then just go through columns and see if something just sticks out to you.
Right. And then the last one that I want to point out is it is possible to tie Screaming Frog with Google Analytics. If you have the paid version, there's some interconnectivity there, but if you don't, just see if you can tie it up using the URLs. And would you start with your most visited URLs or the most problematic URLs, you think?
I do both. What I like to do is to just look at data from different angles, and then you just find different issues and different ways to improve things, and you get most out of it if you just look at data from different starting points.
Yeah, that's probably a gold mine of ideas for the new year. All right, and if somebody has more questions, perhaps they can buy one of your books. Here's to the 一番優しいスマホ SEO の教本 and 一番優しい Google Analytics の教本. Or they can perhaps contact you at our website at Ayudante.jp.
Yes, and I'm on Twitter as well. So the books are in Japanese, but
yes.
of course I can provide help in English as well.
I should say, yeah, you're part of work closely with the global team, part of the global team, and I'm afraid to ask how many languages you speak because it's a very suspiciously large number of languages.
It used to be 6. It's getting smaller, but if someone can come to me with some German or French websites, I would be very happy to practice my German and French as well.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Paulina. If you have any questions, let us know. Either in the comments of the video, write us an email, go to ayudante.jp, ayudante.jp/en for the English website. Anything else that we're missing?
I think we're good.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
アユダンテではこのような内容のご相談ですとかご質問を随時受け付けております。企業ホームページのお問い合わせフォームよりお知らせください。あと、企業ホームページでは同様のテーマのコラムも定期的に連載しておりますので、合わせてご覧いただけると嬉しいです。では最後に、この機会にぜひチャンネル登録をお願いいたします。最後までご視聴ありがとうございました。